Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson, once again of HuskerBigRed.com. Joining me, as always, is my co host, Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. And we're back here on a Friday. And Danny, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. It's Friday. I can't complain, and it was a busy week for Nebraska. A lot of good news, a lot of interesting news. So it's been a good week, and I hope the good vibes can continue.
Yeah, Nebraska earlier this week, picked up a bunch of commitments. There was three 2023 commitments. Jacob Hood, landed at Nebraska from Georgia in the transfer portal. So I guess let's start there. A lot of Nebraska fans always get excited about, offensive line additions. And Jacob Hood, a former three-star recruit, was part of the 2022 class with Georgia. Didn't play a snap for the Bulldogs. Is going to have 4 years, left of eligibility. So, what are your impressions of Jacob Hood? What do you think his impact is going to be?
I think it's gonna be. I don't think he's gonna, make like the one of the best Nebraska linemen of all time. But the fact is that we have him for 4 years, and that is gonna be huge when you talk about developing and adding stability to an offensive line that desperately needs it. And with this coaching staff's reputation and track record of working with linemen, I really do think there could be a positive outcome and development here. I know Hood didn't play a lot at Georgia, but he's very good. I was watching some of his high school highlights just to kind of get a feel for what he was like, and he's very good at creating lanes for the running backs. Very good in pass protection. He took on a lot of edge defenders in high school and was able to block them pretty well. So I definitely like the pickup both for longevity and in terms of what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, he's talented. He's 6'8", 340, some pounds. But I think, people need to, get their expectations in check a little bit. This isn't Walter Rouse. This isn't a guy that's played, almost 3,000 snaps of football, 30 career starts. Walter Rouse was going to come in and start right away, probably at left tackle for Nebraska, or at least on the right side. Jacob Hood, I'd be surprised, if he was the starter next year, to be honest. I just don't think he needs a lot of development. He could be a guy that could be potentially a swing tackle. I mean, it's going to be nice to have him in that mix with Bryce Benhurt and Turner Corcoran and, whoever kind of is over on that right side. Hopefully, Teddy can take the left side there. But yeah, I think that some fans a little bit are, they've, kind of done, oh, this is a huge addition. I think it is a big addition long term, but I don't know that Hood's going to be a day one starter next season. So I think people need to get the expectations, in check just a little bit with him going forward.
Yeah, but I also think too we saw what we had last year and it was nothing. Now we have somebody that we can at least work with who Georgia wanted, who was on the Georgia roster. I do think it's sort of big in that regard, like you said, more long term. But I mean, I think to me this is just a sign that things may be looking up at the position.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, they definitely needed more depth. They didn't have enough depth at tackle. They still don't have enough depth at tackle, in my opinion. I think they could definitely use another experienced guy who's, played college football and had starts under his belt before. So I would hope to see something like that maybe in the later transfer portal window, but it's still a nice addition to the room. The 2022 class wasn't a great offensive line haul, and I think it just adds more competition. And if Ben Hart or whoever ends up playing on that right side is able to beat out Jacob Hood along with some of the other guys, then that'll just make him more qualified kind of for that position. But if I was projecting the starting offensive line right now, though, Jacob Hood would not be in my first five. I'll just say that.
No, but I mean, like you kind of just alluded to, it's good competition for the room. It forces the linemen to, not that they haven't worked hard, but when there's another body available at your position, it kind of makes you kind of look back a little bit and say, hey, there's another guy that could come take my spot. So I think in that respect, it's good too. And at this point, we just need depth on the line, and we need, players that can, quite frankly, play on the line because this was a position that that was not only sorely lacking last year, but was a result of misses from previous years as well. So having that kind of development is going to be important for this program.
And in terms of the 2023 class, all these guys, Jacob Hood will be able to play next year, and all the signees this or commitments they'll be signing next week. When the late signing period opens, but Ishmael Smith Flores was one, 3-star tight end, out of Arlington Martin down there in Texas played under Bob Wager. Jeremiah Charles is another one, playing under Bob Wager. He committed this week, like both of those guys. And then Demetrius Bell also committed. One of the higher rated players left on the board, is ranked by a 4-star, by some services. He dropped a little bit. It looked like his ranking according to 24/7 Sports, but still a guy that's ranked 451 overall. He had a lot of, receptions. You look at a guy like Charles had like 326 or somewhat yards receiving last year. Bell had over 700 yards receiving, I think like 57 receptions, had almost 300 yards rushing, 6'1", 175 pounds. So just, I know there's a lot to kind of go through, but out of those three guys, like who's kind of your favorite out of those commitments this week?
Probably Bell, because he can, bring that downfield threat for Nebraska. And, you see a lot. There's a theme in this wide receiver room, and that's speed. He brings speed. And quite frankly, um, Charles also brings speed, but Charles is a little bit more different in that he is a little bit better in terms of making things happen after the catch. Bell can straight fly. So, I really like Bell. I like the fact that we're going down into Tennessee for recruits as well. We're kind of covering, all areas of the country. And I mean, just to kind of touch on that point, all areas of the country. Matt Rule was in Missouri yesterday, so they really are kind of taking this wide scope approach on recruiting, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, and it was some quality pickups. I'll say my favorite pickup this week is Ishmael Smith Flores. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. He's only played football for 1 year, and he's already ranked, in the top 500 or the top like 600. I think he's in the 530s of the composite rankings. 6'5", 210 pounds. A basketball player. Played a lot of like wide receiver. Is going to be a tight end, like a move tight end, and he played under Bob Wager, who kind of convinced him to play football. Same with Jeremiah Charles, has only played 1 year of football under Bob Wager. So I like Bell, but honestly, I think that long term, I think these other two guys from Arlington Martin are going to have a big impact on this program, and I just think they have huge upside. They're like track type athletes and guys who can really excel on the basketball court. When those skills can translate over to football, I think that can be a big deal. And Ishmael Smith Flores, has shown that. And there's talk just from some of the reporters that they think he can play, next season. And I know that he is still, pretty raw, but when you look at this tight end room, I could see him, slotting right in there. And he it was really going to be a special type of athlete. So, out of all of the guys that Matt Rule has landed, I think he's one that has, almost as much potential and upside as anybody.
And I don't think that's just hyperbole. I think there is legitimate talent and upside to him, and it's going to be interesting. Just in a matter of, I'm looking at my calendar here, 2 weeks. We've kind of added some life in the tight end room with Art Gilbert and Smith Flores. So I'm very curious to see how that will play out, and I think it's great to have continued depth at the tight end room, especially when we know the guys that were there previously, Fedoni, Carney, and Rollins. We know that they're talented, but we haven't seen anything. So it'll be good to kind of get that sort of position battle going just to see where we stand. Because I think um, I'm blanking on his name. Vokulik did well last year, and once he got hurt, Casey struggled, I think, in finding that safety valve and that security blanket. So having capable bodies at the tight end room, I think, is going to be pretty big for this offense, no matter who starts at quarterback, quite frankly.
Yeah, definitely. And I just like that they've added a lot of, weapons, in the passing game. I mean, we've looked, this receiving class, there's like 5 or 6 guys, coming in here, and you look at, Billy Kemp, Josh Fleeks, Malachi Coleman, Jaden Doss, Demetrius Bell, Jeremiah Charles, Ishmael Smith Flores. I mean, we can go on and on. There's and I didn't even get all the guys on the list, Jalen Lloyd, Bryce Turner. So there's a lot of speed, and this wide receiver room has just been totally remade overnight with just a bunch of incredible athletes. Honestly, if you look at it, I mean, Nebraska could have 4x100 relay team out there with Coleman. I mean, Jalen Lloyd. You know, you put. I mean, I'm sure Jeremiah Charles probably runs the thing pretty fast too. Jaden Doss, I know, does. So I mean,
Turner, yeah.
yeah, you've got four guys basically who run the 100 in sub 10.5. I mean, that's insane. That's insane speed. And then you add, you know, some athletes like, you know, Smith Flores and Gilbert and, you know, Fedoni, you know, tight end. And I like what they've got, you know, at the running back position too. I mean, that's kind of a little bit overlooked, and there hasn't been as much kind of movement there with, you know, Anthony Grant and AJ Allen coming back. But, you know, AJ Allen's going to be a
Yeah.
superstar.
Yep.
So, you know, I think that, you know, there's a lot of talk about this passing game, but, you know, I really think that this staff is going to, you know, lean into that running game. And with those two running backs, why not?
And I think there's a lot of talk about the passing game just because there's so many bodies at the wide receiver position. I mean, there's players on this roster from last year whose name I can't even remember right now, but I'll know them when I see them. But uh Janarian Bonner, Dranian Bonner, is he still on the team?
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah,
He said
okay.
he's
So
coming back. So
so
yeah.
yeah, there's just so many mouths to feed. I wonder how it's all going to play out. Do you think, in your opinion, that some of these receivers could be switched to different positions, or do you legitimately think that they all have a chance to be a wide receiver and stay in that room? Because there is a lot of mouths to feed. You got Betts coming back too now. I mean, oof.
I think it'll be interesting because, you know, some of those guys definitely need, you know, time to develop. So I think that's part of it. And, you know, yeah, I do think with, you know, like Jeremiah Charles could definitely play defensive back, in my opinion. You know, if it didn't work out at receiver, you know, I mean, Malachi Coleman could be a tight end. He could be an edge rusher. You know, so there's a lot of guys that could move around and do other spots. I think they'll just, you know, kind of see how it works at receiver first and then kind of go from there. But, you know, it's interesting to have a number of athletes in that room, and I feel really excited about, you know, not only the prospects of for next season, but going into the future. I think it's going to be fun to see Nebraska have so much speed, and hopefully, you know, the quarterback position can you know, deal with that. And I guess that's a great segue to talk about Dylan Raiola, who I think every Nebraska football fan is hoping that Dylan Raiola is the future starting quarterback of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And maybe after the interview that his father, Dominic Raiola, did with the, you know, the guys over at Husker Online, Steve Sipple and John Callahan, I think, you know, people may be feeling a little bit better. Dylan did, you know, release that he's going to be visiting USC this weekend, and we've talked about them. I know Oregon's in the mix, Georgia, you know, and obviously Nebraska. And Dominic, you know, said a lot of really positive things about, you know, Nebraska, about the facilities. You know, he loves the coaching staff. Obviously, his brother's part of the staff as well. But and that kind of gives him, you know, some inside or some insight into what's going on inside the program. You know, he mentioned not only the facilities, but how the guys have to sit down and eat breakfast, and, you know, how Coach Rule is being accountable with guys going to class and all those little things. And, you know, he called Nebraska a sleeping giant. And I was struck by one of the things that, you know, he said at the end, like, it's, you know, this program, it's a big deal in the Raiola house. I mean, he said that, and Nebraska, I think, is going to get, you know, full consideration here. The other kind of news that came out of there is it sounds like Dylan's going to be making a decision in March, which is kind of a narrow time frame. And the Raiola said that they are going to be coming back to Nebraska. So, you know, with Rule visiting there a couple of times, what are your impressions of this recruitment and where things stand with Dylan Raiola?
Well, I think that Elder Raiola is right that Nebraska is a sleeping giant, and having a competent coaching staff that actually, quite frankly, gives a shit about their recruits and their recruiting, it definitely makes a huge difference. The visit to USC for the younger Raiola, Dylan, worries me, but at the same time, this is what you're going to get when you have a high profile quarterback. He's going to visit all the schools, and he's going to be wanted by all the top programs. And, I've heard people say, and I'm sure you've heard me say on here countless times, it's all about who gets that last visit, who can kind of get that last visit and seal the deal. And I think Nebraska still has a very good shot. I mean, you know, I think people are starting to recognize that this program is on the upward trajectory, and I think recruits and players and parents are buying into Matt Rule. I mean, just look, for example, Malachi Coleman. You know, the home visit he had with Matt Rule kind of helped him seal a deal about wanting to return to Nebraska, so to speak. So I think there is legitimate legs to Raiola coming to Nebraska. I'll believe it when I see him on the field for Nebraska, but I do still think we have a good shot. And I know fans look at social media likes, like, oh, Dylan liked this tweet from Georgia and this, that, and the other thing. All the kids, it's all part of what they do. They all want attention. They all love, the press they're getting. So I wouldn't worry too much about those. I still think Nebraska has a very good shot. It's not going to be an easy recruitment to finish, but I do feel that Nebraska is still very much in the mix.
Yeah, and the direct quote, I was able to pull up there from Dominic Raiola is, you can say it's just another program, but it ain't. In this house, it's not just another program. So, I mean, there's definitely, that tradition with Nebraska. Dylan's grown up with it. He was on campus in, November, I want to say, for the Wisconsin game or the Minnesota game, one of those games. So he's been Nebraska a lot. He's got that familiarity. And he's got familiarity with Georgia, obviously, as well. I think, to me, those are the two clear leaders. Oregon's always in the mix, with kids out west, and it wouldn't shock me if they got in it. Phil Knight loves his NIL money, and they're playing the NIL game as well as anybody right now. So that's always a concern. But with these quarterbacks, I mean, I know that there's all this NIL stuff, but it's like Dylan Raiola is going to get NIL wherever he goes, whether it's Nebraska. I mean, he could go to, Bethune-Cookman, and the NIL money would be insane. I mean, that's just the way it works anymore with these guys. So I don't think that is gonna. I don't see it being a huge, like, oh, Nebraska, it doesn't have a great NIL pitch or whatever. I don't see that being the biggest issue. And plus his dad was a pro football player, so it's not like the Raiolas are in a position where they need to get money or anything like that. Not saying that that's anybody else's situation, but I don't think that the NIL money is going to be the driving factor in this recruitment. I think it's going to be about the coaching staff. And look, Lincoln Riley does a great job at USC. I mean, he's coached how many Heisman Trophy winners now, and I'm sure that he would be able to help Dylan Raiola push for a Heisman Trophy. But Malachi Nelson's also there, a 5-star quarterback in 2023, and he's also really damn good. So, I mean, if he's there, basically you're in a situation where it would be 2 5-stars, competing for the job, and then one of them is going to hit the portal, because Dylan Raiola is not going to sit there until his junior season waiting to start. That's just not going to happen. He could maybe go somewhere as a freshman, but if he doesn't start and he's not going to start the next year, I guarantee you he's going to hit the transfer portal. That's just the way it works. I mean, you think Arch Manning is going to be sitting until his junior season? I guarantee you it's not happening. So, that's something to keep in mind. And I think that's a big obstacle that USC has to overcome. Oregon, lost their 5-star in 2023. So I think that helps a little bit. I'm not saying at all that Dylan Raiola is afraid of competition or anything like that. I'm just saying I don't think we're going to see a ton of, like, I just would be surprised if the number 1 quarterback in 2024 and the number 1 quarter, and like the number 2 or 3 quarterback in 2023 went to the same school. That's just my thoughts on it.
These kids want to play. I mean, plain and simple, they want to play. They want to play for these big time programs, and they want to, try to, formulate a path to the NFL. And, I think Nebraska would be able to offer him that. And I also think, if I'm him, I'm looking at two things. Where can I play? And what's the future of this program? Do they have a clear outline for stability and success in the future? And I think right now Nebraska has both of those things. So I really do think that, Nebraska is still very much in the mix, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, March is coming up quicker than we think, so it's already almost February. So I don't know. Let the games begin.
Yeah, that surprised me, that timeline of March, but
Yeah.
I think that doesn't hurt Nebraska, because Nebraska's already pretty well known in this thing. And I Matt Rule obviously had the tweet and the visit, the beatbox thing, and Satterfield went out there. You mentioned Omar Hales, playing video Call of Duty or whatever with him. So those are all things you have to do. That's all part of the recruiting process, and it's I think Nebraska has set up all the infrastructure. I mean, Dominic Raiola was talking about how they have as good of facilities as any team in the country. I think that that's true. Nebraska has a lot of great things to sell, and once Matt Rule gets this thing going, which I don't think is going to take long. I really don't. I really believe Nebraska is going to win 7 or 8 games next year. I think this program is going to go on an upward trajectory very quickly with this coaching staff, with some competency, and hopefully that will be able to entice Dylan Raiola. But if not, there's still, I've said this a million times, I feel like, but can't forget about Daniel Kaelin. He's a very good quarterback from the state of Nebraska. And we might as well mention just because it's sort of interesting. But Nebraska was one of the teams to reach out to Jaden Rashada this week. He had the whole snafu with the NIL thing with Florida, the $13 million deal that apparently the money never existed. I'm not sure exactly, what happened there, but that's essentially the gist of it. He's visited TCU, or he's visiting TCU this weekend, Arizona State, but Nebraska, South Carolina, Utah, and some other schools have reached out to him. But to me, I don't think it's probably going to go anywhere.
No, and you're looking at a kid that's already been to 3 different schools before he's played a snap. So I don't know. I don't know if I would want him. I mean, pure talent wise, yeah, but I don't know if I want the headache.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because I don't want to sit here and say that Jaden Rashada is a bad kid or anything like
Yeah,
that because of all this, but it just shows that I think he got caught up in this shady world of college football, and he was committed to Miami, and I'm not sure exactly. I don't know if it was the offensive struggles, or whatever the Hurricanes, because they didn't have a good season under Mario Cristobal.
they didn't.
But neither did Florida really either. So he flipped his commitment over there, and everything was signed, and they promised him a certain amount of money, and then it wasn't there, when before he got to campus. So I don't know, man.
That's
it's a
so
crazy.
strange to me. Like, I don't know. Either you have the 13 million or you don't. It's not like $5, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
that's just so weird. Like, I don't know. I would want some sort of guarantee that they had the money. Maybe he didn't ask for it, but we kind of have to remember too that this whole NIL thing is all relatively new, and a lot of players don't get coached up on it. The more, I'm seeing more and more players when I do interviews on other shows. I always ask, has anybody talked to you about NIL? And more players have said, yes, like we're learning about it and things like that. But I mean, I don't know, 13 million to not have and 13 million to be promised, that's just like crazy money to me.
yeah, and I don't, I haven't read all of the latest reporting on it, but it sounds like that's essentially kind of what happened. The Gator
Yeah.
Collective is not very organized, apparently. So, yeah, it's not a good look for Florida. But there was talk that the Florida NIL issue was messed up even when Rashada was like going through the recruiting process, and there were rumors about that. So I don't know that it's like a huge shock that it didn't work out, but if I had a guess, I feel like he's going to go to Arizona State because he's from Northern California, and he was training to Oregon before the Ducks kind of went in and got Dante Moore. And the old quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham is now the head coach at Arizona State, so there's some connection there. That's where I think he's going to end up, and that'll be a good place for him. He can have a chance to play right away, which is what he wants. And if you work to come to Nebraska, honestly, I think that would not help with the Dylan Raiola situation. So I think if you're looking at one of those two quarterbacks to invest in, obviously I think you invest your time in Raiola, and then if you don't get him again, Daniel Kalen I think is a better long-term option for Nebraska than probably Jaden Rashada is.
It's a better long-term option for sure, but I think he would be a good talent to have. And in today's day and age, you kind of want to win now, and Nebraska fans kind of want to win now, especially when we saw what TCU was able to do, just absolutely turning things around. So fans just want wins, and I'm at the point where I'm like, I'll do whatever it takes to get them. So if we miss out on Dylan Raiola, I do like Daniel Kalen long term, but Jaden Rashada would be interesting. I will say that I wouldn't mind him coming here at all just based off of pure talent. I just wonder, I know, like I just said a little bit ago, that he was kind of had his own issues, but I think it was more just being promised things that weren't kept.
But I mean, yeah, it's he is a recruit that has put NIL at the forefront. Dylan Raiola, that's not an issue, but Jaden Rashada, like you have to have NIL, or you're not even going to get in the door with him. So, that is part of it, and that's something. Those are the kind of kids that Matt Rule said he wasn't really interested in recruiting. So I was kind of surprised that they reached out to him, but maybe it was a situation where they wanted to check it out for themselves. You don't want to make assumptions about people and miss on somebody when you
Yeah,
just assume something, but.
because boy, have we
Um,
done that before.
yeah,
We have
yeah,
done that before. So, but I mean, I think, and it kind of speaks to where the program is at right now, even before playing a game this season, where we're being mentioned in an article with Jaden Rashada. I mean, I think there's something to that.
And I feel good, with the Nebraska quarterback situation. Either way, they've got, if Casey Thompson's able to win the job this year, I know that might not be like ideal for Jeff Sims, but for Nebraska, I mean, you could have, Casey start for a year with a solid backup in Jeff Sims who could play 4 games, so he could play a little bit if needed. And then you would have Jeff Sims starting for 2 years. So, I mean, that could be a really good situation, or at the very worst, if Sims wins the job, this year, then he could start for the next 2 years. So, I mean, there is that aspect of it where Nebraska's, they have a couple of really good options at quarterback. So, I think they're, probably looking at that 2024 kid, whether it's Dylan Raiola or Kalen or whoever, as, a guy who could potentially be that starter in 2020, that 2025 season. Now, if it's Raiola, he's definitely going to have an opportunity to win the job, going into 2024, and he's got the talent to do it. But, it's not like Nebraska is going to be desperate for a starter, next season, at least with the way the current roster is set up.
And not for nothing, but it's kind of interesting. I've seen a bunch of Heisman Trophy odds lists, and Jeff Sims is on there.
Yeah,
So
I know. It is
maybe the odds
interesting.
makers know something we don't. I don't know. I think a lot of it, honestly, I think him being on that list has a lot to do with we don't know how Casey's going to heal from his shoulders. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting, and I like having the issue of having which quarterback should I start, and it's kind of a race rather than our starting quarterback is down, and now we have to start somebody who's absolutely terrible. I kind of like that. It's a little bit of a different change.
And I think the Jeff Sims thing, to me, it's obviously it's a bit like projection, but it's if, say Sims starts in Nebraska, like, has a crazy turnaround and goes like 10-2 or something, and he puts up crazy numbers, like he probably would be, in the mix. So I think it's like, some chance that happens, but, I don't put too much stock in the Heisman odds. But it is interesting because it does show, the type of talent that he has, and he's gotten a little bit of that buzz before at Georgia Tech too.
And quite frankly, Sims is a better fit for the offense that they want to run, but I don't want to push Casey out the door immediately either. So we'll see. I think this is a really good problem to have, and I think with this coaching staff's ability to recruit, we won't have an issue of lame duck depth quarterbacks in the room for the foreseeable future.
For sure, for sure. I did want to, switch topics really
uh,
quick here.
from
Forgot to
good
mention
news
it
to
in the
bad
from
news.
good news to bad news, but I know it's, but we got it. We've been following
I
Huskers a
know, I
little
know,
bit, and
I know.
it does suck
Uh,
though because the season was like fun and it was going so well. Then Juwan Gary gets hurt, and Emmanuel Bandamel gets hurt, and the team battled against. I can't even remember who they played the other night. I'm blanking on it now.
um,
Oh, Northwestern. And it was a close game. They shot the ball well. I mean, Kaisei had a hell of a game. He had like
he did.
15 points in the first half and did all the Derek Walker didn't have a great night, but Northwestern's really good at post defense. So, that doesn't shock me. But man, is there any hope for this team to get that NIT berth, or is this season just like for all intents and purposes over?
I think the season is another wash, and I mean, I like with the injuries, it's not so much that they're not even executing or stuff like that, and that is a part of it. But losing, Gary and Benimal is absolutely massive. I mean, for this team that has already struggled with depth, sure we have good younger players like Denham Dawson has played really well and stuff like that, but those are two key veteran players in Gary and Bandamel, and those are just huge losses, and I think this year it might be over. Um, I hate to say that, but I just don't see Nebraska having enough depth to kind of make a run at Big Ten play. Yes, they'll obviously, of course, make the Big Ten tournament, but I don't really see them going far.
Yeah, I mean, I was holding out hope that they could try to, push or be in the mix to have a 500 record, for that NIT berth. But I
Yeah.
mean, maybe look, they have to win this game. I think Saturday at Maryland for that to be like a remote possibility, because the next game's at Illinois, and there's no way they're winning that game after at
Nope.
least after what we saw, unless it's just a total. Because
Nope.
Illinois is just, I mean, they're a damn good defensive team,
Yeah.
and without you kind of saw in that game, it was competitive. Then Gary went out, and then Nebraska just went downhill. So it's like,
Now
it's
Gary's completely out,
yeah, I know,
and
and
so
and I feel horrible. At least Gary can come back. Bandamel's done; his career's over, so he's already played. I mean, unless there's some sort of medical
yeah.
red shirt, but you're not going to get that after 20 games. So, I mean, it's a tough situation for him because he played really well. I mean, I remember we'll always have the win over Creighton, though. They got
Yep.
him and Juwan. I about called him Rashawn Gary. Him and Juwan Gary got the black shirts from Trev, and so that's
Yeah.
like it's
He
too
was a really good
bad.
defender too. He always got his arms in the passing lanes, and he was an alert basketball player. So
And they can both shoot too. So I mean, they were both really good defenders and rebounders. And so you took that defensive. So because that was the thing is like almost any game Nebraska went into, I'm like, okay, well we can play defense, so we at least have a shot. We've got Derek Walker in this defense, and then the other night against Northwestern, I mean, they just tore it apart, and Nebraska just could not. The offense wasn't that bad, but they just could not get any stops. I think Northwestern almost scored like 80 points, and they're one of the worst offensive teams in the country. So I think that kind of shows where how the defense is missing these guys. And Dawson's a solid player. Lawrence has done some solid things. They're both basically freshmen, so it's just a bummer that it's kind of a starting that reset early without getting to see what this group could do. Playing with that preferred five starting lineup all season.
and I think with the preferred five starting lineup, they had a 7-3 record in the games that all five played, which is kind of sad to think about. They only played 10 games together. But I've seen multiple debates on both sides of the spectrum for this. Um, do you think Fred is gone after this year?
It's going to be tough. I think it is depending on how they close the stretch. I think every game is important. They have to try to get wins, but what they won 4 Big Ten games a year ago or 3, and they've won 3 already. So I feel like if he can get into that like 6-7 range, I do think he has to win a few more games with this team because look, injuries happen. You can't go to Trev Alberts and be like, oh, we lost 2 of our best players. Now we lost 15 games in a row. That's not going to cut it. This is big time college basketball. Quoting Dan Hawkins from back in the day. This is
Yep.
big time college football, brother. Like you gotta be able. You gotta have the next man up. I mean, Purdue is playing 2 freshmen and their starting lineup, and they're the number 1 team in the country. So, you got to get guys ready. But I think as long as Nebraska doesn't do a complete nosedive and lose like 10, 12 games in a row, I think he'll be back. But I do think he's got to get to that 6-7 win range to, really show some improvement to keep his job. But right now, I would say they should bring him back for next year.
I'm just interested to see, the future of the program because it seems like we're just sort of stuck in this, rotating hamster wheel of, 6 to 7 Big Ten wins or 3 to 4 Big Ten wins, whatever, and then we have a good start to the year, then we kind of fizzle out by January, February, and I don't know. I mean, it is a tough question. I think he should be back. The injuries definitely played a huge role in the season this year, but I mean, I don't say that he should be back with confidence. We'll see how much, these next couple the rest of the Big Ten slate plays out, but I mean, it's just so disappointing and, kind of an encapsulation of Hoiberg's tenure, just so underwhelming and had promise, but ultimately just couldn't get the job done.
He did, and I think a lot of people have a worry about like who can Nebraska get and all that. We had the same concern about Scott Frost, who's going to do better than Scott Frost, and I think we found that solution. I don't think that you can't let a coach hold you hostage, with incompetence just because you don't know who could replace him. But I do
Just
feel,
based on the basketball record alone, pretty
yeah.
much there would be a lot of coaches that I think could probably do a better job.
I mean,
Sorry,
could you
Fred,
could
but
you or not could you or I do worse? I mean, I feel
I
like
mean, I could probably win 2 or 3 Big Ten games a year.
keyword being probably, but probably,
I
I
mean,
mean,
Fred's at the probably stage right now too, so I mean, we're about even there. Ugh.
so it's I am getting this team gives me a little bit of like the 2021 Huskers, like the football team Scott Frost vibes where like they were close and they showed like a lot of good things and then they brought Frost back and it was just a total
That was one of the
disaster.
most frustrating seasons of my life.
Yeah,
Uh,
so like
ugh.
I get the vibe about this team, and I could see Trev, saying like I feel like Fred is close and things are going in the right direction. The team's playing hard, so I feel like that Trev's gonna stick with the status quo for at least one more year. But Fred has to get this team to an NIT or something like soon because I feel like he's just been such a massive disappointment. If you told me when they hired Fred Hoiberg that in the first 5 years, Nebraska wouldn't see, postseason basketball beyond the Big Ten tournament, I would have said you were a liar. you're a liar, because I would have at least believed that we'd be, a solid NIT program
Same
right
thing
now.
with
So
Frost. If you had said,
yeah,
Frost is never going to get to a bowl game, then we would have been like, what? But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
as long as Fred does an onside kick when he's ahead in the game, then I think he might be okay going forward. But I don't know. This team just doesn't excite me. What can I say? It doesn't excite me. I feel like I really liked this team in the beginning. Now with the injuries and now with the attrition of the season starting to settle in and losing, Bandamel and Gary, it's going to be a rough road for the program moving forward, I think. And I kind of, we just kind of brought it up. Part of me wants Fred to stay because he had so many injuries, and we don't know, what he can do when the team's fully healthy, because there is certainly been progress there. But the other half of me, it's kind of like 4 Big Ten wins, 3 Big Ten wins, 2 Big Ten wins. I mean, we probably could get somebody more qualified at this point to get the job done. I mean, yes, I know the Big Ten conference is hard in terms of basketball. It's extremely difficult. Any team can win on any given day, but I, what he's put forth is not, you know, something that another coach can't accomplish, in
Hmm.
my opinion. I don't know.
No, it should be acceptable. I mean, there's too much invested in this program to just win, 3 or 4 games. I mean, I get it's nobody's saying that Fred should be winning Big Ten titles, but we should
Yeah.
be closer to, 8-12, 7-13. Nebraska should be in the 8 to 10 win range for the Big Ten, every couple of years at least. And it strikes me that if you could have had like Bryce McGowan's with this group of with this group of players, and if you could have had like those, add him with the 5 guys who were like starting, and have that that's a team that probably could make the NCAA tournament,
Yeah.
honestly. But it just takes time to. I feel like Fred knows now what how to build this team for the Big Ten, and I like Eli Rice, who's coming in, has had some nice performances, but it's
Chase
just
Clemens too, I think.
yeah, I just don't know how this team's gonna, get better under Fred. So that's something Trev's gonna have to worry about, and that's gonna be kind of the key talking point, I think, over these last 11 games in the regular season. Is Fred gonna win enough to keep his job next year?
Well, I think the basketball program has a very limited ceiling, and we haven't even reached the ceiling yet. So it's like, you know, is there something better out there? I don't know. Otherwise, Trev is going to have to make a tough decision, as if he hasn't made 75,000 tough decisions already. And thanks, Bill Moose. So,
Yeah. But if you want to watch Nebraska basketball this weekend, they'll be playing at 1:30 Central Time, I believe, or no, actually, I'm wrong about that. I got my Mountain Time screwed up. It's going to be 3:30 Central Time against Maryland on Saturday, and then they got Illinois on Tuesday. So keep an eye out for that. We'll still be covering the Huskers. You can find out some coverage on huskerbigred.com, the greatcornholio.org as well, and make sure you guys get into the comment section. Let us know what you think about Dylan Raiola and some of these different, recruits, and as well as these commitments. Hit that like button, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future episodes of the Husker Big Red podcast.
and full disclosure, my website is about 95% football now, just because I'm more interested in that, quite frankly. So if you're looking for basketball coverage, admittedly, look somewhere else, because it's all football for me now, and I'm just covering all the offers and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. Football just brings me more joy lately.
Yeah, it's been tough to cover basketball. I haven't done quite as much, as I was earlier, but it's been a slog. But hopefully, Nebraska gets an upset win on Saturday, and that will give us kind of, some positive momentum going towards the stretch run. And regardless of what happens, we'll have it all covered here at the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. So check us out again on Monday. We'll have everything that's all the recap all the news from the weekend. And as always, folks, make sure you subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.